And how many do we have online? 4 or 5.
We have 10 people.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to get started. We have about 10 people join us online as well. Can you hear us online? Or just put in the chat something to confirm that you can hear us, okay? Well, welcome everyone. You know, it's Sunday evening, you've got other things to do to get ready for the week, but we appreciate you being here. This is the first of, we hope, many community meetings about this. My name is Mike Aziz. I'm the co-chair of the Facilities Planning Committee. It was formed earlier this year. Arthur Chabon is also co-chair of the committee. He's out of town this evening, so he couldn't make it. But the committee, we have a couple of members here, David Seibel and Michael Hanna, and Sue Robinson, of course. And there are 8 or 9 others that are part of the committee that have been instrumental in putting this work together over the last several months. We've worked closely with the village staff, with the board, with department leads, with chiefs at Firehouse. It's really been a group effort to get us this far, but we've gotten to a really critical point now. And we wanted to bring this discussion out to the community at large before it goes back to the board on December 16th. So we've made a lot of good headway. If you haven't, please grab a couple of the handouts that are over by the door. And we'll use those a bit to guide our discussion today. So just quickly about myself, I'm an architect, practiced for about 20 years, and what I specialize in is planning at this scale, planning for towns and municipalities in a long-range manner, trying to understand how to align capital budgets with needs of the community, and put together plans that are achievable. So I was inspired by the needs that we have, the discussions around the bond referendum, and saw that there could be a place for a community-led committee in Irvington to kind of reframe the discussion going forward and work closely with the board to define our needs in a kind of more rigorous way, in a more comprehensive way to address not just the needs that were brought forward for the bond, but DPW and other departments that we have here, and opportunities that there are to use those types of projects to strengthen downtown more generally and achieve the vision that we all came together to create as part of the 2018 comprehensive plan, which was just a couple of years after I moved to town, and I thought it was a really inspiring moment for the community to come together and develop a vision for the next 10, 20 years plus. But those types of plans are very high level plans. They don't really lay out the steps that one needs to take to execute on them. And I think what this committee has done is try to develop a scope of services and a process for doing that. Taking that high-level vision that, for example, said things like, well, the firehouse probably shouldn't be on Main Street anymore, but then answers the question, well, where could it be? If we don't find a suitable answer, then maybe it does have to be on Main Street, but there's a process for coming to that conclusion. And that's what we're here to talk about. So, we have, we have a fair number of people here. I'd say treat this like a discussion. At any point, just sort of raise your hand. Happy to pause and clarify anything along the way. And for those online, we should be able to hear you.
You have to use the Q&A. If you want to ask a question, you can use a Q&A, and if I don't think it'd be too successful to do audio, so if you want to send a Q&A written question.
Okay. Good. So maybe what I'll do is I'll describe sort of what we've done and what we'll be bringing to the board on the evening of the 16th in terms of materials and recommendations. So the charge of our committee was to take a kind of broad look at all of the village facilities and properties. And within the capacity of and skill set within the committee, the expertise that we have, assess the needs of those departments that occupy those facilities in the near and the long term, and make recommendations about which ones presented the highest need for investment and improvement. And that investment could mean renovating and upgrading, modernizing their space, or it could mean actually expanding their space or relocating it. And we also looked at, so in addition to the facilities, we also looked at the properties that they own, which some of them are unoccupied today, some of them are undeveloped, open space areas, and determine which ones of those would be suitable for new facilities in the future, or relocation of facilities in the future. We broke up the committee into a series of subgroups to do this work. Some focused on the sites themselves. David really led that effort. We had another group that went through all of the available past documentation that we could get our hands on. Really decades and decades of studies and plans. In that work, it was interesting how many times, for example, the firehouse has been studied over and over. Their needs, locations, expansion opportunities, but DPW has never had anything like that. The police department has never had anything like that. So some of the things that we uncovered, there's been a real imbalance in the way we've addressed facilities in the past. Not to say the firehouse doesn't have pressing and urgent needs, but we think when you're planning for a 10-year capital campaign, you need to take all of these into consideration. We also had a group that's focused on engagement, because one of the things that we understood coming out of the bond referendum was that the community had a real desire to be part of the process going forward, to have the process be open and transparent, and have a degree of co-creation between those who are developing the recommendations and the community itself. So I think this meeting is a great example of how the committee is taking that seriously and wants to be part of what happens going forward. We've had probably upwards of 30 or so meetings at that point up to this point within our group, with staff, with stakeholders. We've tried to make it as inclusive as we can. And then there was a group that was focused on, well, what do you actually need to do to make these decisions? What is the industry term, the scope of work that we need to engage in to be able to make a responsible decision about where we're going to spend our money, how we're going to use the limited resources that we have in this village, whether it be financial or land. There really isn't much that we have to work with. So we went through really through the summer, working independently in those groups. We came back together towards the end of the summer and developed a brief for the board, which we brought to the board for review. And it had some 25 or 26 different sites that we had identified as potential candidates around the village where facilities could be located in the future. Some of them are sites where there already are facilities. And we developed an assessment of relative needs across the major departments and facilities. And then the kind of full-scale scope of work, very detailed proposition for how we could go forward with a professional consultant to support this work, because it exceeds the capacity of a volunteer community. And what the board, I think the board was very appreciative of all the work that was done, and their I will say, also before we went to the board, we toured all of the major facilities in the village with the department leads, with various chiefs from the fire department, and got to hear from them firsthand and see the facilities in the flesh and understand where the kind of most critical needs were and what their plans were, if any, for the future, for expanding programs, or where they're being challenged and where the limitations are doing that, now from the physical point of view. So the board is very appreciative of all that work, but they asked us to kind of go back and convene the group one more time and try our best to prioritize the needs and in a kind of quantitative, more of a quantitative fashion, and propose which of the departments we should start with, because they are, some have more pressing needs than others. And they asked us to go back through the sites and to assess them on what we would consider the most relevant criteria. And you'll see on this matrix, and I apologize, we couldn't get the projector to work, but on the matrix that's on the left, there's a kind of scoring system that we developed for each of the sites that evaluated them on things like their size relative to a recommended use for it. I just want to let you know too, if you want to walk over there, the camera can track you. Oh, okay. So all I would say, all these documents will be shared on the committee page. If we dig into them, and we could spend time probably on it later. But they went into things like the potential for impact on neighboring uses or neighbors, whether or not it aligns with the 2018 comprehensive plan vision. Does it have natural features that would be impacted or not by development on the site? And so we used the kind of scoring system, and what it did was it identified sites that you would want to start your studies with. If you're going to bring on a consultant, you're kind of really narrowing down the scope of work, doing it in a more cost-effective manner. And the color coding up here is our take on which sites would be the best candidates for what we're calling emergency services facilities, so it's fire, police, and potentially IRAC. Sites that would be the top candidates for public works. Public works kind of requires a lot of land area. It's probably more likely than not that it's going to be dispersed into multiple locations like it is today. But through a needs assessment, I think we'll find the right clustering of facilities. Some can be remote, some really want to be down here in the road. Sites that would be good for the recreation department. Again, it's kind of a longer term play project. And then if the village were to vacate some of the sites that they currently occupy, which ones could be candidates for village-sponsored housing? So in that housing could be workforce affordable. Maybe you'll correct me if I get this wrong. Is a term in New York State targeted at housing that is between 60 and 80% AMI. So for a community like Irvington, that's police officers, that's school teachers, that's nurses. So, it's, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that. Average median income. Yeah. So that's that kind of housing, and David is chair of the housing committee. You're, no? You're on the housing committee. That's what, so. And so we've been working closely with them, overlap in the communities. And we'd really like, as part of this process, to be able to identify sites that could be used for that. There are state programs or county programs, state and county programs out there where the state or county will pay you for the land that you could offer for the development of workforce affordable at market rate, and you could use that, the proceeds from that sale, to be able to develop municipal facilities. Really anything, but that's an example of why we're recommending that all of these things be studied in concert with one another. Because if you look at them through a straw, you're going to miss those opportunities to bring the overall cost of the most immediate needs down to.
I just got to keep you over here. The mic is over here.
So we developed this matrix. It's key to this map. The blue or village zone, red are facilities that could be relocated like DPW. Orange are privately owned, but ones that we put in for consideration. What have I missed? Yes.
I just have a question. So for affordable workforce housing,
Yeah.
the pool comes from within the county, within the state, and how does that register?
The primary funding is Westchester County.
Oh, I mean, where the affordable workforce people come from, if you apply, are they anywhere in the state, anywhere in the county?
That's a question a lot of people ask.
Yeah.
And basically, it's a lottery. You can be in Oregon and you'll be a lottery. Bottom line, though, is who in Oregon wants to move there if their job is in Oregon. There will most likely be more people that apply for the lottery who already live and work in this neighborhood and here. And all of our municipal workers and school teachers, etc.
David, actually, could you come over near the mic if you can speak?
So, therefore, in other communities, they don't get people from New Jersey moving over here for this piece of affordable housing and all that. Although that person who has been working in New Jersey and has been commuting to White Plains, they may say, "Oh, I'll apply here and then move here." And then the other half of that is what tends to happen is if you're one of those people and you move here and you get one of these lottery chances, the likelihood is you're going to pay attention to jobs that are available right here. So if you're a teacher who got this job that lives in 40 miles away, you may all of a sudden start paying attention to any openings available. Go ahead.
Can you just differentiate again between workforce affordable housing and capital A affordable housing?
Okay, well,
Or are you saying that they're the same?
capital A affordable housing, the term affordable housing, applies to everything affordable. It goes to Section 8 and indigent individuals up to full over AMI, or full anything below 100% AMI. That said, the term workforce affordable housing has generally been applied to housing between 60 and 80% of AMI. AMI in Westchester is about $125,000. This is a very simplified answer. It gets complex with how many family members you have, various other things. But basically, that means in order to rent one of these things, you have to earn about $70,000. And that can be one person or it can be combined income, which again varies in these admin recipients. So this is not for non-working people. So that term workforce is generally applied in that area. If you're out of that area, that's just in the general catch-all of affordable housing.
Right, but
So we are.
people who work for the public service, it's not, or no, or
No,
anyone.
anybody
Okay,
who
thank
is earning in that
In that
category of
range?
60 to 80%, they can qualify for the lottery,
you. Gotcha.
and they can run in the lottery.
Are any of these subsidies or grants federal funding?
Absolutely, and the 60 to 80% window has a whole number of, they call it a capital stack, to get your funding to do this. But in that window, several communities in Westchester have created housing that's been fully 100% paid by the bonding for the housing, no money from the community. And if the land value of the underlying property, if that was owned by the municipality, the market rate value of that land has gone back to the village. That's the county fund. The county also has a matching infrastructure fund, so that anything that you need related to this project, they will fund money for that.
As we know, with the incoming administration, housing might not be a lot of.
But this is Westchester County, and so far is doing that. And they are very anxious to disperse the monies that they have to the local communities as soon as possible, which makes our work interesting to move forward. Mike, you want to take that back up? Or does anyone have any more questions about that?
So, just a couple final points here, and then I'd like to open up the discussion. So, on the one-page handout that we have here, I just want to point your attention to what the recommendation will be for the board on the 16th. It's that a professional consultant be brought on board to do three things primarily. One, conduct a space needs assessment for those facilities that we deem to be of highest need, as fire, police, DPW. I think we want to consider IVAC in that as well, because it's a emergency services building. While that is not village owned, it would make sense to have that considered. And that space needs assessment, the reason we're recommending that be done by a consultant and not continued work by our committee, is that you really have to dig into what the compliance requirements are, benchmarking best practices. You will likely go and tour other municipal facilities of similar nature. But you really want to understand what is needed, not plan for a Christmas wish list, but really create something that's going to be tailored to Irvington, where we think we're going as a community in terms of growth and other types of needs. The second is to then look at the sites that are the highest candidates for new facilities and conduct what we call feasibility testing. So that's after you've determined how big things should be, the preferred adjacencies of one facility to another, or the general location in the village, to look at each of those sites, test building footprints, massings, see if they'll fit, and then are they appropriate? Are they in scale with the neighborhood? Do they? And that's really an opportunity for the community to be heard with visualizations and other things that an architect would create. There'd be engineering assessments. Some of these sites are tricky. We've identified two sites down here at Station Road and Broadway that have some floodplain issues. You're going to need an engineer to look at that, understand the investments the village is going to be making in the culvert underneath. fairly technical work there. And then to develop construction cost estimates for what facilities would actually require. And at that point, we'd be working, the consultant would be working closely with village staff to understand how exactly could that be funded and financed. What grant programs are available? How much of our budget or long-term bond opportunities, what are they, and how could they be applied? And then the third piece is we really want to impress on whatever consultant comes to do work here that the community expects to be active participants in this process. And they're, one, providing feedback, and two, input. They want to be informed, but they're also providing feedback along the way. And what I know from my work is that it's not enough to wait for people to come to you or just to go to the required meetings with the board and hope that people take notice, but you actually have to go to them. And so, Michael and others on the committee, I say most people on the committee actually have a lot of experience with that in the village over many, many years. And so I think there's an opportunity there for us to educate a consultant on what works best in our community. We'd like to see them at the farmers market. We'd like to see them at Rocktoberfest at the time of the line. There are things, you want them to come to you to find you, not the other way around. And I think that's been one of the failings in the past. So that's the recommendation. We think this work could be conducted in more or less 6 months. You'd have to issue, well, I'll say the village does not have to issue a public RFP for services of this nature, but they could choose to do so. We have already introduced some qualified consultants to the village. We can continue to do that. And we can help draft a scope of services working with village staff, take part in selecting that preferred consultant, interviewing them, and the role of the committee and the overall decision-making process, I think is probably best left somewhat undefined at this moment, and that should be confirmed with the consultant through the bidding process and the final scope of services development. Because different consultants will have different ways to do that, but I think it's, I think the committee will continue to have some role in this. So I'll pause there, probably about halfway through our time, and we can go into more details on this work. I will say I would consider this work the floor, not the ceiling of what is to come. In other words, the consultant could be brought on board, and they could say, well, what about this site? What do you think about this one? Or you know what, when I went and I talked to, I reviewed the assessments, I saw this a different way. So this is a starting point. I think it is reflective of the scale of the study we're talking about. We're probably looking at 3 or 4 sites for the firehouse. I don't think there are 10 out there that are appropriate or feasible. But this is, the product of a lot of really good work by a great committee over many months. So I'll pause there. Questions?
Yeah. Is there any kind of evaluation of how or what the maximum or minimum amount of real estate effect on real estate taxes should be as a criteria in developing a plan?
Yeah, that's a recommendation of our committees that after the construction cost estimates are developed and you understand how much these facilities would cost to construct, then when you're looking at the different funding opportunities, whether it be to bond it or to find a grant or a combination of the two, then working with village staff, I think it's probably not a consultant service. I think the village staff will understand that better than they will. They'll be able to to develop those projections.
And will that be used as a go, no-go in certain parts of the project?
I hope so. I would hope that as part of the, that the community gets multiple points to weigh in on this, and that, if the goal is to create a process that's open and transparent, that that's communicated to the community and they can voice their opinion. I will note that the Board of Trustees in this process will have the responsibility of endorsing the final plan, but the community's voice should be heard.
Question, since we're initially talking about basically emergency services
Yeah.
Departments, what is the benefit of putting all of them or most of them into one physical building? And secondly, have you studied average response times from locations that are being considered based on historical calls for service?
And there's an efficiency of putting them together. If you've got 3 departments using one building, they're using the same bathrooms, right? That's the simplest way to think about it. In terms of response times, we've talked in general terms about Broadway, and is Broadway too far, or is that centrally located? Our understanding is it's not. It's that you could come out of the historic core of the village, and being on Broadway would still provide response time that's needed for emergency services. I don't think you want to go too far east of Broadway. I think then you start to be challenged. We have not studied that, and I think that will be part of the consultant services. But
You mentioned Station Road. I
Yeah.
would think Station Road, particularly the tunnel, is not accessible to existing fire
Yeah.
equipment. They're talking about larger fire equipment.
yeah, we're looking at the properties fronting Broadway on Station Road, so you can get out the station, you're fronting it, you can.
They'd be accessing on Broadway.
Like,
Was your calculations done, were your calculations done without taking cost into effect or estimating cost into effect?
No, it was not
In
one.
terms of your scoring system's
Yeah.
not taking an estimated cost at all? for any of the
I
sites?
think it's part of some of these criteria, so whether or not it would require what we call temporary swing space is part of the scoring. So if you put the firehouse on the current firehouse property, you have to relocate it for 12 to 18 months. So that was a kind of a knock against that, and the scoring still comes out high for a lot of other reasons. But we didn't have one that was strictly about estimated cost of construction. We have one that talks about flood risk. That's going to increase the cost of construction. So it's in there, but it's, we just didn't have enough information or capacity to really study it. But it definitely is reflected in the scoring. Yes.
So I really, you had it color coded so interestingly, and I live on Buckout, and I know one of my concerns after the hurricane that we experienced in the flooding is, extreme weather,
Yeah.
but also access for these important routes. So, are you saying that you can't really talk about these places? Like if we're looking at Buckout, there's a bunch that are yellow or gold or orange, what are there, and then what's down there, and what's there. I wonder if you could just say that, or you
It's
Say what?
talk about the areas that you've color coded up there as possible places.
Can you just restate the question? So you're asking to have us talk about some of the different areas that are noted.
So what is the DPW site? Our recommendation is that the DPW should not be there.
Right.
So we remove the DPW because it's
Flood zone, it is a flood zone. Right.
And that's the only thing that's actually fronting on Buckout Street. What is an ideal use for that property as to the codes?
Well, I agree with shopping and wonderful development of expensive properties.
Well, the village would have, if it moves the DPW, the village
Yeah.
has two choices.
Yeah.
They can put it on the open market to be
Sure.
sold to a high-end developer who will put in luxury housing,
Sure.
or it can choose to go to the affordable housing, and do that, and if they do that, then they control what it looks like much more than they would if they just sell it to a developer. And it still, however, brings the property back onto the tax rolls.
Mhm.
So that those people are paying taxes, and if there's retail on the ground floor, retail is paying taxes, and it revitalizes whatever. If you sell it to a market rate developer, you know, they'll put on those nice high-end things like you see up in Tarrytown on the river.
Anyway, I was just interested in the color coding of those areas and wondering if you could just briefly say, this is at this spot, this is at this
Yeah,
is
we
there.
can, that's something we haven't done.
Yeah.
So for the emergency services, the 3 locations identified are the current location of the firehouse, but it would require expansion of that site to include some of the adjacent properties. It simply won't fit on the current property. What we refer to as the Toll Brothers site, which is on the northwest corner of Station Road in Broadway, where there's one house, the White House that's sort of down below the elevation of Broadway, but there's a large open space there. And then across the street, where Memorial Park has that small playground, and then the green space between the playground and Broadway.
Do you want to just try and do it from this side for the?
Sorry. And then the fourth one, which was sort of somewhat of a last minute addition, but the parking lot that was just fixed up at Broadway, at the corner of Broadway in Maine. It's not a great site in terms of proportion. It's very narrow and long. We require different access for the fire trucks. You'd actually probably have to drive through or do a kind of long loop in and back out.
Actually, the line is wide enough for our ladder truck to turn around without a K-12.
You wouldn't want them backing in and out of traffic on Broadway at that very busy intersection. And there's a lot of money just spent on fixing it up. So
So these are just options and ideas, this is all vision, there's nothing that's been decided.
Oh,
oh
it's
no,
very
not
clear.
not
Yeah, it's
the
very
least.
clear to me.
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting, because you have, the interstate or whatever's way down there. And so what is a big orange piece right
So
here?
these are orange pieces. So the sites that are closer, or they're furthest east, are the ones that we've identified as potential remote storage locations for DPW. So things they don't need on a daily basis, things you don't want to have to go get. There's a water main break, or if there's a snowstorm. So the blue, so the color coding, the color coding is not aligned between these two. This is by who owns it. This is by use. So the red is merchant services. These are how many sites we think could have some DPW facilities on them. And they're scattered throughout. There's some that could still be down by the waterfront, like a salt shed, small salt shed site. But what you'll likely have is the testing of various different sites in the east. And you're going to want to cluster as many as you can together, so you don't have staff all over the place. Recreation is green. There's obviously where recreation is today in the old church on Main Street. They actually have a lot of their equipment stored where their fields and where their programming takes place. That makes sense for them. You don't need to find a new home to put all that stuff in, because then they'll be carting it around all day. But they have office space in the basement of that building, but that office space could be anywhere in the village, really. Maybe down at the senior center, there's a second floor up there that hasn't been occupied in some time, kind of move-in ready. If recreation wasn't in that building, it raises the question of, well, what should we do with that property? Could that be a property for workforce housing? Could it be market rate housing? Could it be a place for village office space? You know, it just raises that question. But because it's not in our top three highest needs, you know, it's a secondary focus of this study. But we do think the consultant should consider it, because there could be a windfall to the village if that property was available for sale. And then the housing sites, some of them are quite small. You might only get 6 or 8 units. Some of them are quite large, like the DPW site. You start thinking about that combined with the library parking lot. If you could find a way to still accommodate that parking, you do need to do that for the residents to live above us. That's in the agreement. But you know, you could really accommodate a lot of housing down there. It could be a mix of market rate and workforce. It doesn't have to be one or the other either. One of the things that can go in the floodplain on the ground floor is parking. You can flood-proof commercial and retail space. So there's a lot of opportunities here to do something else other than the parking. Yeah, sorry.
I also have a question on that point. So,
Yeah.
we still don't know how this works, but can you change zoning, or do you have to? Is there zoning, or can you say you want this to be retail space or commercial space or both residential space?
That would be one of the recommendations coming out of the consultant's work, would be whether or not that zoning should change to another zoning classification that exists today in the village, or if there should be some new classification, if there should be an overlay. I don't know if the village has required the grant for a TOD study yet, but I know they've applied to do a TOD study, which would include rezoning recommendations for this whole area. So I think there'd be some synergy there in the work.
That said, there's not a major need for major, it's tweaking the zone. There are little things like, for whatever reason, American has decided that a parking garage is not allowed.
Just like, for the firehouse ends up moving, for example.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't know, that just seems like a logical place to have.
Yeah, and you would need to rezone for mixed use there.
I was just curious if coverage was taken into account and like the opening space that's open space currently, making it covered, and then the opposite as well. Because when you think about flooding, some of that is because we have nothing to absorb water, and there's lots of
We had, one of the story was just natural features. Are there significant natural features so over here would score very high for that, or are there not? It's a kind of urban site in the core. And then in the notes, if it is designated parkland today, that has been identified, and if that's the case, we would have to provide that equal amount somewhere else in the village. So all of those things have to be considered.
That said, nothing can be built in this town because they couldn't count the excess rain runoff that would result from that.
right, or there's opportunities where there's just a lot of coverage to both beautify and
Well, that would be the vision for the DPW site. That could be some wonderful central parkland as part of that, considering not covered site. A lot of housing.
Mike, we have a question online. One is, it's a process question. Who would pay for the cleanup of the DPW site?
I mean, I would think that a brownfield type grant would be the best opportunity for that. And that's something that could be done before it is put out to bid, to make it more attractive to developers. It could be done kind of in parallel with that. There's a lot of different ways I've seen it done, but there are a lot of great grants out there for remediation, and I would expect that would be the first place you'd explore it.
The other option for that is the infrastructure grant the county gets. If the property is going to be used for a workforce housing property, they will have really big government for doing anything to correct any problems, you know.
We can't hear you, actually, so if you're answering, you have to be over here.
So the other bucket of money is the infrastructure grant associated with the land acquisition grants that the county are offering. And those are very large buckets of money available to do things like prepare the site, move sidewalks, move sewer lines, whatever has to be done.
I was just curious about with the workforce affordable housing, what is the state or the county looking for in their requirements to, like, what's the minimum number of units that would need to be made available? I know that there's been a mandate for years that we need to increase our affordable housing, so, you know, how many, because there's quite a bit of land that between the firehouse lot, the DPW lot, and the rec lot,
The,
potential.
Can you just reframe the question for our online audience?
Zoe's asking about how many housing units are we talking about, roughly, available. The village went to Case University Land Use Conference about 2 years ago, and in that conference there was Larry as a board member and Larry Schaffer as whatever, a few of us from the housing committee. And at that conference, they gave our village an architect to work with and an individual from the county of Westchester who is in charge of dispersing all this money to look at a project. And the project that we just sketched out over 3 full days, separated by a month each time. It was really well done. Involved the library parking lot and the DPW site, putting only 3-story housing on it, with housing on the 2nd and 3rd story, and parking garage underneath the whole mess. And they came up with a plan that penciled in as meeting the capital stack with available funds at that moment, not costing the village anything. And that was for 85 units.
Is there a minimum for this program?
You can build 6 units. And Duxbury, right now they have 1 parking lot and 2 empty lots that they are going to the county and the state with to put in affordable units with retail on the ground floor, apartments up above, and it's sort of gonna look like what our nail salon building looks like now.
Yes.
I had a question about the green coded rec department.
Yeah.
Because you had mentioned rec offices and equipment that
Yeah.
tends to be in your field, so I just want to point out that there are also classes.
Yes.
There are dance classes and art classes and performances. So I just wanted to, I was going to ask if that's included, because I haven't had a chance to look at that.
Yeah, it would need to be considered whether or not it gets relocated. You know, in a scenario where the offices went to one location, what would you do with those programming pieces? Could you find another location in the village for them? Would they want to stay there and you have something else go into the lower level of the Old Church building? You know, that's when you start to get into that.
Right,
Yeah,
but it's
maybe-
included in the consideration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No, okay.
When you studied the locations, the possible locations of these facilities, Was it done with and without the rework of the roadway and the traffic circles and all that stuff that they're also planning to do?
That's a good question.
We looked at that, and if anybody's looked at that, whoa, boy, there will be no more red lights on Broadway from Yonkers to Tarrytown. It's all traffic circles, and to accomplish those traffic circles, they are going to have to eminent domain land around those traffic lights now in order to fit in this bigger circle, and very interesting. So if anything, what we are planning is, we're not planning it. The consultant is going to look at it. But it appears that the best location for a fire hall would be somewhere on Broadway. Because that's going to have the better traffic flow than any small side street, including Main Street. So that site down there on the corner of Station, Harriman, and Broadway has enough room it's like 5 times larger, either of them, than the current fire hall. And there is currently, Larry, I think it's like a $500,000 project to dig up Broadway now to correct the flooding from the street, and that's been funded already. So that whole area, which is what we're referring to as the where the
Station
White
Road.
House is,
Off of Station Road.
off of Station Road, is going to be all dug up and the stream reverted, and it's a really wild plan of half the stream going under the aqueduct and the other half going through the tunnel if it floods. But that is in the works now already and funded. And is one of the reasons Toll Brothers didn't do anything with the White House and doesn't plan to.
It seems to me that the traffic circles would eliminate the use of the property at Main and Pierpont Drive.
Based on what their plan is now, their preliminary plans, it would not. It would be basically using that parking lot, if that was a decision one wanted to do, would involve the trucks using the Field Point Drive, what is now red light, or that access to enter Broadway.
But I think the question is, eminent domain, how much of that intersection would need to be cut into for eminent domain to make that traffic circle?
There is
The gas station, the
a
apartments?
fairly large section between the parking lot and where the actual street entrance is. So that would be cut down a little, and the drainage ditch, whatever that's called, for Field Point,
Yeah.
which is that pit
Yeah.
over there, that would probably be affected and have to be shoved around. But they can fit it in. God knows how it's going to affect the gas station.
And it's an example of how if there's public funding coming in to make improvements in an area, that we could piggyback on to some of that. All those things should be considered. Yes. So we'll go ahead.
Is the
Go first.
shooting range discarded now? Is it run out, or is it still an issue that the police department would really like to have?
Police department would love to have a shooting range. Yes.
Pardon?
The police department would love to have a shooting range, and if that can fit into the budget, then it should be looked at. And the village board and then the voters will be able to include it or not. But what we are suggesting is that the consultant look at it and put a price tag on everything.
And bring bring to the discussion how many other municipalities of our size have a shooting range? What are the advantages of it? Actually, take another look at the numbers between doing it in a different location, maybe back on the east side, or with the new facility, wherever that might be. There are, unlike the firehouse, which will have compliance requirements for the equipment that are very cut and dry, the police department won't have that. We'll rely more on best practices and understanding benchmarking with other municipalities. I spoke with the chief about that. Doesn't believe that that's ever happened for our village. So it'll be a new process that we'll undertake here to really understand what does an Irvington PD department really need to look like to operate and provide the same level of service that it does today.
Are you taking into consideration noise abatement issues?
Yeah,
For instance, some of the sites you recommend are closer to multifamily housing with sirens, with loud diesel engines. I don't know if you're gonna relocate the alert system that's now on top of town hall.
Yeah.
That could really be a consideration,
I mean, it's one of
Well,
our.
one point on that one specifically,
please,
uh,
or even the shooting.
the town has more than one of those bullhorns.
Yeah.
And the other primary bullhorn is at the corner of Harriman and Broadway. So that goes off every time the one in town hall goes off. And if you're talking about any of these things, if we move anything, there's going to be a problem at the new place that needs to be looked at and exchanged for maybe removing the problem at the old place. So
Many problems.
if you take away the closeness to the siren from the Main Street school, where it disrupts classes every time it goes off, and remove that, that's a village benefit. But yeah, there may be a little louder for the ones at the new ones. So those are trade-offs that will be the many long list that we will be looking at.
It's a game of whack-a-mole. Like, if you take it away from one location, you're gonna have, and it's all about those trade-offs. And
Ideally, I would think, sound the siren should be the commercial industrial.
I mean, those are the things the community needs to make, to be part of
Many
this.
people have asked why we're doing this at all, when we're not using loopers or, something else. But, that's been an ongoing thing. Let's not diverge into that. I would like to say one thing. Michael, as part of, he's heading up a portion of this group to get the word out to everybody. One of the visions, besides town meetings like this, and the farmers market, is Michael is composing a email list of sort of thought leaders in the community. So that's everything from faith leaders to school teachers to the all the individual little committees that exist, the housing committee, the roots committee, the rec department, etc.
It's also a community member, so if you're someone who is a repeater who shares information, we would like you to, because it's basically the attempt to have people who are engaged and interested or representative sharing out this information.
So the idea is we're going to push out emails as we progress and give those people chances to sort of see it right in their email, and then they will go out to their rest of their Mahjong club and talk about it and get community response. We really don't want this to be like has so often happened in this village of I didn't hear anything about this, and now you're spending my money. So we're going overboard with that, and I want to say this guy is great. To have somebody who is professionally done this with other communities, working as a volunteer, and helping the process along is really fabulous.
I mean, none of this is gonna happen without a strong committee starting it and framing the discussion in the right way, and that's what this group has done. But it doesn't stop here. Like, you just got to stay on top of this. Come out to the board meeting on the 16th. I don't know if any decisions will be made that night, but if the board can hear from you, whether you like the direction this is going or not, just let them know. And then we've got, a little bit of a lull probably over the holidays, but the ideal situation is we start the new year with some real energy and some fire to sort of take this back on. It's been a while, right? But a lot of, the kind of ball's been put on the tee. Now we just need to hire someone to come in who's got the time, the capacity to roll their sleeves up and really start crunching through this.
Who has done it before?
Who's done it before. You need someone, you need an architect, you need engineers, and this is a real effort.
Because we're getting close to wrapping up and some of this is wrap-up talk, I just want to get the one last question here, which was related to the Isabel K. Benjamin Recreation Center, whether we know if that is free and clear to use, or are there deed restrictions or anything like that. Like some properties have restrictions in how they can be used. Do we know?
As far as we know, at this point, we've looked at all the deeds for all of these properties. That one does not have a problem. Details, when we get into these things, and who knows when they can come up. I would like to just address one more thing about taxes. There's this group called the Irvington Taxpayers Association, which is an ad hoc group not associated with the village. And they have established a subcommittee to look at the capital budgets of the community and to comment on that. And they will be reviewing the long-term capital budget for all the equipment, our engines, and whatever we buy. And they will also be crunching numbers about infrastructure requirements, etc., and what's in the budget for those or not. If you're interested in that, go join them and put your input into them because they are intending to bring to the DOT their suggestions about how to keep taxes down. And I think the whole community is concerned about that. That's it. This is not meant to be a spend money project.
It actually brings up one point I forgot to mention, is that what we're recommending we do with this result is something that more often than not, towns and villages do every 5 or 7 years in a kind of public and open setting like we're recommending. And in the intervening years, more likely conduct the updates internally with staff. But I think this is an opportunity for this not to just be a plan that sits on the shelf and go, what did that plan say? Okay, wait a second, like this is outdated. In 3 years, whatever money we spent on it is lost. I think this could be the beginning of tying a facilities planning process to our capital budgeting process to take us forward as a village. And find the right rhythm that is that's right for us. It might start a little bit more intense at the beginning as we address these really high needs, and then taper off over through the years. But it is really best practice to have an ongoing capital facilities improvement list that you can align with your capital budget, and every once in a while bring the community into that, because the comprehensive plan that we did in 2018, it's too high level. It's not instructive enough to inform a budget at the level that you need to actually bond for it, find the grants for it, etc. And when you do a process like this, you also become much more competitive for the grant funds. And when you go to a developer and you can say, listen, we had 50 meetings with the community to develop this plan. We have 2,000 people engaged in it. The community supports the idea of doing X or Y. They're going to have that much more confidence to come and do business in the community. And we all know that we've had some challenges with that in recent past, right? developers to see what's come before them. They'll go to one of our neighboring municipalities to do their business. We want high-quality development here. It kind of begins with a community process like this that, pulls us all together and put us out on the market in a strong way. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Mike and Michael and David for doing this. I had a question. Mike, did you say that this graphic information was available on the website?
It will be, as soon as.
Can you just
we-
reframe the question? It's not.
The question was whether or not these materials are available on the village website.
It's on the news.
I looked at it, I didn't see a link.
He didn't have links to this, but because we're submitting it to the board for the 16th, it will all be public
Is that the
documents.
first time it would be presented to the board or?
They saw an earlier version of this, but this will be the first time that this will be presented at the board of trustees. So there are earlier versions of this online. But these updated ones will be available. I think we're sending them in on the 12th or the 13th for the 16th.
Will the larger scale graphics be here at the library?
It's a good question.
We can look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Final question, yeah.
Yes, I was just wondering if in years past, there have been some discussion about joining with the other villages
Yeah.
and share facilities.
Yep.
It seemed like that, or like the other
Yeah.
side, for a variety of reasons. Are there any grants or anything that still consider that, or is that really off the?
It's not.
Can
off
you
the
just
table.
reframe it again?
Oh, yeah, the question was, I believe it was, will shared municipal services or facilities be considered? And yes, it's in our recommendations right here, that gets brought back to the discussion before any final decision.
Yeah, are there any federal state grants that are?
I'm not aware of that. I mean, maybe something, yeah, I'm not aware if there are grants. The question was if there were grants for that, and I'm not aware of that.
I have to say thank you, this is really great. I think we've done what we've
Well, thank you all for coming out.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
transparent.
My pleasure. Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
we'll stick around if there's any questions, but